We are here with Josh Turner. Now, many of you may recognize the name, and then you see the face, and there is a guitar in the background somewhere.
Yeah,
But this is not the Josh Turner who sings country music for a living.
no, I
This
wish I
is I
was.
wish you were, yes. But
Yeah,
I tell you, I think you're really going to enjoy this opportunity to speak with Josh. Josh is a pastor, a teacher, a leader, a book writer, working on getting his book published, working on his doctorate. And first and foremost, I think if you ask Josh, and you'll get to know a little bit more about him through this podcast, he's a father and a
yep,
husband
yep,
and a Christian and a follower of Christ. He has actually, which we're going to talk about, 10 project. We're going to discuss a
yep.
little bit about this business idea that he had of taking leaders through a Christian journey to help them spiritually, mentally, physically, and probably even financially to be
Mhm.
better leaders in the industry. And that's one of the things we need. Josh, man, without further ado, how you been?
Dude, you and I talked a few weeks ago. Besides messing up my back, everything else is good,
Right.
but I guess that's what happens when you turn 40,
Right.
so things just start going downhill.
For sure. Josh, we've talked several times since, but I heard you first as you spoke at Crosspoint in Nashville. It's a
Yep.
church there in Nashville, Tennessee that I frequent. I would call that my home church at this point. And I'll be honest with you, I heard your message and it was just remarkable. On this podcast, we
Thanks,
talk a
man.
lot about the financial aspect of things. We talk about how to save better, how to plan a little bit plan a little bit more, but ultimately how to live happy. And your
Yeah.
message was second to none. And for a reminder, in case you don't remember what you spoke about that morning at Crosspoint, it was about making sure that you're not asking God why, but what do you want me to do with this? And
Yep.
that
Yep.
was, I mean, if you could apply that to your life, not why
Yeah.
God, but what now or what's next?
Yeah.
What do you want me to
Yep.
do with this? Just expound on that just a little bit in your revelation you have with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think we'll talk about it, I'm sure. But I have a severely special needs child. She's 14 years old. She's the 12th known case in the world of a rare genetic disorder. And when we had her, I was a pastor, and the first place as a pastor that I go usually is like theological or doctrinal or whatever. And so I'm really trying to figure out, how does God work in this, right? And so I kind of become a little bit of a head case. Like, I just start studying all these different things, and every denomination and every scholar or theologian, they all have their theological slants or bents, so
Mhm.
to speak. And I tell people all the time, we're at the end of the day, anybody who's a pastor or a theologian or a commentary writer, we're all men and women who love the Lord, who are doing our best to try to interpret what the Word of God says
Right.
in an accurate way. And so, I kind of came out of more of a charismatic background, and the charismatic background really, man, you believe hard, you pray, you read scripture, you do all the right stuff, and then basically God will answer the prayers that you're praying
Right.
or believing. And that wasn't what I was experiencing with our daughter. She spent 3 months in the NICU. She has a tracheostomy feeding tube,
Mm.
wheelchairs, sleeps on the ventilator at night. And so then I have to reconcile, okay, if this isn't working the way that I would like it to,
Right.
then I have to figure out doctrinally, what do I believe about how God works in suffering. And so then you don't know me that well, but I just swing the pendulum, like
Yeah.
I'm a
That's
man of extremes. And so then I go like hardcore Calvinist reformed, everything's predestined, everything's like whatever. Well, then that, if you go down that road too far, it leads you to some places of, well, if everything's predestined, then why do we have churches? Why do
yeah.
we
What are we even
pray?
doing?
What are we even doing? And so, man, I really came back. It was really a 5-year journey for me, and I would still
Wow.
say I'm in it some. It taught me to hold everything looser
Mm.
theologically a little bit. But instead of trying to figure out, why this happened, right? Like, why was my daughter born special needs? I started asking Jesus the question, what do you want me to do with this?
Man.
And it
Huge.
was just one of those things. And I've learned, I've been in ministry and a pastor for 17 years. Most people, when hardship or suffering or trials come, the question they ask is why.
Mm.
They try to figure it out. And there are some things on the side of eternity that are just the mysteries of God. and that's
I
all
believe
they're
that.
going to be. That's all they're going to be. And I don't like that answer. I wish I could figure it out more. But what I've learned is it puts you in a different position when you start asking God, when you stop asking him why and you just start asking him, what do you want me to do with it?
Hmm.
Because the Bible says a lot about suffering. And I was reading this morning in Colossians and how Paul even says, he goes, I'm actually thankful that I get to suffer for you. He's writing to the Colossian church. And I think that there's a lot of things that God does in suffering. I wish he did it,
Hmm.
other ways.
Right.
But suffering is one of those things that it stinks and it's hard, but it's one of the things that God uses most. And so
Amen. Yeah,
I always
I
just
believe
tell
that.
people, ask God, what do you want me to do with it?
And if you can have that mindset, I mean, how has that changed your mindset since you've went down this 5-year journey? Has
Yeah.
that opened up even possibilities that you didn't
Oh,
know were even
yeah. I
existent?
mean,
Yeah.
man, I am a totally different person
Wow.
from before our daughter was born to who I am now, not just as a husband and a father, but theologically and doctrinally, I'm different. And what it really did was it forced me to know what I believed and why
Mm,
I believed it. And really it helped me. And one of the guys that I love so much, he's probably, I would say, one of the best living theologians alive. His name's N.T. Wright.
okay.
Um, and I became okay with the mysteries of God.
Hmm.
And I became okay with, we so all the time want to figure everything out. And sometimes I think we just have to go, God, this is a mystery that I'm not going to understand on this side of eternity. And I'm just going to ask that you would help me to trust you in it
Right.
and quit trying to figure it out all the time.
And once again, what do you want me to do with it?
Yeah. What do you want me to do with
That's
this, Lord?
that's amazing. And that
Yeah.
revelation alone can change your life, I think, if you take it. Honestly, I can't speak to that level of suffering. My son
Yeah.
was born with some, and many of the people who listen to the pod show or the radio show
Yeah.
know that my son was born with a condition that causes brain tumors to grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And God has tremendously worked in our favor in that,
Yeah.
that he's still able to, at 3 years old, be able to talk whenever he shouldn't be able
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And it's not as plain as perhaps another 3-year-old, but at the same time, your message alone spoke to me, not only in that situation, but in every situation, day-to-day
Yeah.
life.
Thanks,
Even
man.
there are people
Yeah.
that go through day-to-day situations that are like,
Oh, for
for
sure.
them, a game changer. And if you
For
can look at it a
sure.
different way, have you seen that message? I'm sure you've taken that message to other places. Have you seen it totally open up people's mindset?
Yeah, yeah. I think whether I like it or not, even the book my wife and I have coming out next year with our publisher, like it's on suffering. And, one of the things that I feel like God has entrusted our family with is to walk through hardships and point to
Hmm.
Him. And, one of the things that I've always felt called to as a preacher and a pastor is I want people to look at me and say, man, if that idiot can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Like if he can walk through what he's going through and trust God and cling to God, I can do it as
Hmm.
well. And so because at the end of the day, right, the hope that we have is in Jesus. And
Amen.
so and
100%.
so and so that's what I want people to see is even in some of the hardest circumstances, man, God is still good and Jesus is still good. And when I talk about suffering a lot, I tell people all the time there's two things to suffering. It's beautiful and painful at the same time.
Mm.
And God's going to teach you in your suffering how to trust him more, how to love him more, how much he loves you and cares for you and gives you grace in those moments. But it's still
Wow.
hard. It's still hard. And
Yeah.
it's still, frustrating and angry. And the good thing is God can handle our anger and frustration.
Amen. And that's huge when you realize that
Oh,
alone
dude.
is, I mean, he's a father. He's a father and
Yeah.
he's there to handle that. One of the really amazing things that you mentioned in this sermon was how your daughters handled it. Because you think
Yeah.
about how we handle it as adults. We are
Hmm.
why? She's born into this situation. It's
Hmm.
all she knows, and she's
Yep.
making the best of it. Tell us a little bit about what she's got going on.
I mean, man, she is just like my wife and I always joke that the Lord loves her the most. And her relationship with God is, I get choked up. Like, it's such a beautiful thing. Like, the way that she is with the Lord and the way that he is with her. And, there've been times, I can't remember if I said it in that sermon or not, but man, I've prayed for her for healing, and she has stopped me from praying for her for healing. And she says, God made me this way for a reason, and he doesn't make mistakes. And to at 14 be able to kind of reconcile that, whatever your theological slant is on that stuff, is a very beautiful thing. But what was interesting for her is she loves fashion, and she loves like makeup and art and all this sort of stuff. And so at one point she told me she wanted to start a blog, and I thought it was because she wanted to be like a social media influencer and have followers and all this sort of stuff. So I felt like it was my job as her dad to teach her all the lessons why that's not really influence or whatever. And she's like, no, that's not why I want to start a blog. She said, I want to start a blog because I love fashion so much that I feel like I know how to dress trendy. I mean, she studies it. I mean, it's weird. And she said, I can actually create something to show other little girls how to dress that are in wheelchairs and walkers and be trendy. So she hadn't written on it in a while. She's like, you got to stop preaching the sermon until I start writing on this blog more.
She's probably got a lot of people coming to her blog at this point, right?
Oh man, well, I think we looked at it probably like last year, or maybe it was a few months ago. And I think she had like 35,000 views and subscribers and all this sort of stuff, and then me, I'm like, let's monetize this thing.
Right.
And
turn it into something.
Let's turn it into something. And so she's just, man, and even the way that she loves other people, like when all the race stuff was going on in 2020, she was like, we live in Atlanta. She's like, we're going to go march. And I was like, no, we're not going to go march. You're in a wheelchair. Dad'll fight somebody. So she creates this for her birthday. She wanted to create this clothing brand. So she created this clothing brand, and it's called Normal is Overrated.
Wow.
And so we start selling t-shirts and sweatshirts that say Normal is Overrated. And then she raised all the money and gave it away to a racial reconciliation ministry here in Atlanta. Wow. And then she started making tie-dyed face masks, which made my wife make tie-dyed face masks.
Right.
My wife's fingers will never be the same color. And
so she's the production line.
She's the production line. And so we were like, our deal with her was always like, okay, we will match whatever you raise.
Awesome.
Well, somebody on Instagram who had 1 million followers sees it and reposts it. So we had to shut it down, because I was like, we can't, like, we're not a production line, we're like dyeing face masks, they're all drying in our backyard on these racks. But she just loves helping people, man. And
the amount of synergy she has around her is incredible.
Oh gosh, dude. She is like, we go to Passion City Church here in Atlanta, which is a fairly big church. And I always tell her, I'm like, you're the most popular person at Passion. Like, everybody knows her. Everybody, like, she's hanging in the back with Louis Giglio and Shelley and all these people. And just, it's like watching it. You're just like, okay, Lord, like, you're doing something that is really cool.
And her name is Riley, right?
Yep.
And
Riley.
And now, does Aiden get jealous, overshadowed? How's that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, so he just came back home. So he's 19. We let him take a gap year after high school. And so he was a fly fishing guide in Montana at a ministry for a year. So he was up there taking business leaders and pastors down the Bighorn River, teaching them to fly fish, rowing boats. So now he's at Kennesaw State University in Atlanta. He'll finish his AA here. Then he'll transfer to the University of Georgia. And
all right.
So, man, we've always worked when we had Riley, my wife, Becca, and I, we really made a decision that we're going to try to keep his life as normal as possible. Mm-hmm. And so we've always just done things for him and tried to make him not feel like secondary or whatever. And we've had very honest conversations with him of, just because your sister requires a lot does not mean that we care any less about you. It's just the requirements. And so they're great together. He's a great big brother, man. I mean, just typical big brother, just picks on her still and does all the stuff that he does. But he's really never had any issues with it.
Good.
Maybe those will come out later in counseling.
Maybe. I mean, but at the same time, to know that as a parent, I mean, how you've
Yeah,
navigated that, it seems to have played out
yeah.
really nicely. And
We
God has
we've
just
always
continued to smile on you.
Yeah, we've just always tried to make, you know, do special things for him. I mean, we just bought him a freaking brand new Tacoma. So he's living
Hey,
a lot, like he's
nice.
just hair down to his shoulders,
Yeah.
driving around Atlanta. So he's doing good.
So what is the book? What's the name of the book that you've got coming out?
Yeah, it's going to be called Into the Storm.
Into the
And
Storm. Okay.
yep. And so I would like to think that like there's a bit of a cowboy in me somewhere. And
Okay.
so I one of the things I learned is, obviously, if you can see my room, I love hunting and
I see
fishing
that.
and
Yes.
all this sort of stuff. So a buffalo is the only animal that when a storm comes, it faces the storm and goes into it.
Wow.
Every
Okay.
other animal like herds up or runs from it. But a buffalo knows that if it goes directly into the storm, it will lessen the effects of the storm,
Hmm.
and it will lessen the length of the storm.
Okay.
So the whole book is about kind of our stories of suffering and journey, and what would it look like to not run from the storms, but to just head straight into them, knowing the one God that knows the storm.
Amen.
And so, yeah, that's what it's out. And so
That's impressive.
it's due to our publishers in about 8 months. So I have
Good
some
for
work to
you.
do.
Good for
So
you.
yeah, yeah,
So that will be on Amazon, I would suspect, in
yep,
middle to end of 23.
yep, yep.
Good. Good. That's outstanding. And as that publishes, we'd love to have you on again just to
Oh
see
yeah,
how
man.
that's going. I mean,
Yeah,
we'd love to
absolutely.
push that. I tell you,
Yeah.
man, you've just, like I said, you've been an inspiration to me. But let's talk
Oh,
about this
thanks.
10 project that
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
got
yeah.
going on. Tell us a little bit about that and
Yes.
what you're doing
So
with
it's
it.
called, yeah, so we call it, it's the 1010 project, and it's based off of Ecclesiastes 10:10 that says a dull axe requires more work, so use wisdom to sharpen the blade. And so one of the things being in ministry for as long as I have is I've had unfortunately, man, I've had a lot of friends fall in ministry, affairs, suicide, they burn out, they just whatever. And so me and my business partner, Tyler Reagan, who used to run the Catalyst conference here in Atlanta, we started having this conversation of what would it look like for a group of pastors and Christian business leaders, which we started last year with the Christian business leaders, to go through a year-long process that centered on adventure trips, right? So it's snowmobiling in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's UTVs through the Grand Canyon. It's fly fishing in Montana and duck hunting. So they center around adventure trips. So we start with a really cool trip. So I leave at the beginning of October. I take a bunch of guys pheasant hunting up in Nebraska. And that first trip is really good to get guys to know one another
Yeah.
and trust one another. And then we do monthly coaching calls with some of the best leaders that we think are in America, pastors, business leaders. And then each month the guys get checked in. They have a coach that goes with them through the entire year. But then really our linchpin is there's actually a place in Nashville called Onsite, which is a counseling retreat center. And they have one actually in San Diego. We use the one in San Diego. So we fly all the pastors and Christian guys, business leaders out there, and we do a week of counseling with them, with therapists that we fly in from around the US.
Wow.
And then we go back to the coaching and we end with a trip. And so really, in the pastor world and the Christian business world, it's one of those things where at times we all end up self-isolating, right? Everyone either works for you, goes to your church, works for you at your company, and you kind of feel like somebody always wants something from you. So we just said, man, what can we do to put guys in a room that's not a convention or a conference or a green room somewhere, but man, like really outdoors having fun? Because what we learned was, guys, we're weird. Like we all get around each other and we start jockeying for position.
Right.
Like we're trying to figure out who the alpha is a little
Right.
bit. So when you do something like snowmobiling, what we learned was it doesn't become about how big a guy's church is, how big his business is, how successful it is. It becomes about that adventure.
Yeah.
And it helps facilitate transparent community. And so that's what we've been doing. And man, it works. I mean, it's one of those
Outstanding.
things. We're going through and trying to figure out the funding model right now and what that looks like, and trying to get the cost down for guys for a year.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's been really great to see guys that they would never know each other otherwise, but then they build these relationships and they stay
Lasts a lifetime.
connected. After a year. So
So you've got it's the 1010 project.
yep,
You're also probably tearing down some walls. You mentioned suicide in ministry,
yep,
and that's a
yep,
sad situation,
yep,
even more so than say an affair or
yep,
uh losing yourself to alcohol or drugs.
yep,
It's a game changer.
yeah,
It's a game ending move
yeah,
at that point.
yep,
And you think about the stress and the pressure that pastors go through,
yep,
business leaders go through. We've got, I'm sure, several business leaders that are listening to this show. And I mean, it's a stressful situation. It's a
yeah,
stressful
man.
place to be in. What do you see? I know the 1010 project, you talk a lot about coaching. And what do you see a
Yep.
common thread being in the business world? Let's go there.
Yeah, I think with business guys, like, so one of our partners is Chick-fil-A. Like, we have a lot of their operators come through, and we
Wow.
work with them. I would say one of the main things that I see, man, is loneliness.
Hmm.
Like, guys kind of, like I said, self-isolate, whether it's business or pastors. There's this loneliness thing. And there's a book that's out called the Loneliness Pandemic,
Okay.
or epidemic, and it talks about how, like, if we don't change, the issue going forward is going to be people that don't have friendships, don't have relationships. I just read an article yesterday that says men above 50 usually only have really 4 friends,
Wow.
and it was just a normal, like, us or Newsweek or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And I you can't do this life in a vacuum, right? Like, we all need friends to rely on and talk to. We all need safe places to not be okay.
For
And
sure.
so I would say that. And then the other thing, man, I think is just pace, at the pace that people run at. And,
Hmm.
we had this pastor on one of our podcasts, and he was talking about the 10 Commandments, and he was talking to a group of pastors. He says, let's just take the 10 Commandments. He goes, if I break 9 of these, I lose everything. Right. Like, if I
Hmm.
break, like, not having an affair, not cut, like, all these sort of things, he goes, I can lose everything. He goes, but the commandment of remember the Sabbath, he goes, if I break that one, I'll get a raise. And so it's like
Wow.
ingrained in us to really not even to listen to one of the 10 Commandments, which
Huh.
is, to rest. And I think that there is something very important in that. And then I think too, for pastors and Christian business leaders, I see a counselor every week.
Hmm.
I've been through intensives for counseling and all that. I think a lot of us, we have past baggage that we don't even know that we're carrying and that
Right.
we're walking with. And so what we end up doing is we end up making decisions about our future based off of past wounds.
Hmm.
And man, having a skilled counselor walk you through healing and some of that stuff along with the Holy Spirit, I don't think you can put a price on
No
that
doubt.
sort of thing.
No doubt.
So
I love that. So you have baggage that causes you, it's from the past, but it causes you to make
yeah,
decisions about the future.
yeah, we all do that. I mean, we all make decisions out of past wounds. Like, my wife and I went through a really bad thing with my former pastor, a lot of
Hmm.
betrayal, a lot of hurt. And I told a friend one time, I said, what I've realized it made me do is not want to trust people anymore.
Hmm.
And so I know that that would be the worst thing I could do for my future, is just to cut people off. So
Right.
I had to go through some counseling to be able to reconcile what happened, to help me continue to be able to trust people as I grow and
Right.
mature.
Right. And it just takes that heart of stone. It appears so quickly if you don't
Oh,
watch it.
bro.
So
Oh,
quickly,
dude. That bitterness will set in quick.
so fast. Something you mentioned about the pace that we're at.
Hmm.
Not to take it all spiritual, because we are going to talk a little bit of finance here at the
Yeah.
back end, but man, I mean, if you ask me, and I'm sure if you ask yourself, it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of what we're doing right now is all spiritual. I mean, we fight a spiritual
Oh,
warfare. And I
yeah.
believe if you could see that, there's a movie called The Sixth Sense where the little
Oh,
boy can
yeah.
see dead people.
Yeah,
How many dead people are walking around right now?
for
And
sure.
Satan has essentially tried his best to keep us busy. And if
Yeah.
we can stay busy, we don't even realize that we're dead. If we can stay
Yeah.
busy, and we're
Yeah.
chasing the almighty dollar,
Well, and I
it
think,
can go
and
downhill real
and
quick.
I, yeah, dude. And I think sometimes we stay busy to not have to deal with the things we need to deal with,
So true.
and
So true.
I've seen it in church world where people will serve and be at every event ever and think, oh, well, I'm doing really good because I'm at church all the time. Well, no, man, but you're also a raging alcoholic, and you're like
Right.
saying, okay, I don't really need to deal with this because I'm at church all the time. Like,
Right.
I think it's a way that we lie to ourselves
For
at
sure.
times,
For sure.
at
And
least I do.
I'm sure as a pastor, it would be difficult too to walk this fine line between grace covering sin and the license to sin, because
Yeah. Yeah.
those two can't go hand in hand. We don't have a
Yeah.
license to sin, but obviously understanding that we're dead to sin and that Christ
Yeah.
came and his blood forgives us of our sins. There's this fine line that if you lean on and continue to live a life of sin, it just
Yep.
eats at your soul.
Yeah,
Just
dude. It
eats at
hardens
your
your heart.
soul. Definitely,
Yep.
definitely.
Yep.
So that's impressive. So that's the 10-10 project, right?
Yep.
10-10
Yep.
project. And you said it
Yep.
comes to us from Colossians 10-10?
No, Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes 10, the
Yep. And
preacher.
then,
Okay.
yep. And then
Yeah.
we also do, and then we also use John 10:10, that Jesus came to give us a life and a life more abundant.
Perfect. Man,
So
that's outstanding.
that's why we called it that.
The 10-10 project. And you can
Yep.
find that. I know I saw it on Instagram. I saw some things
Yep.
on Facebook,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken.
It's on Instagram, Facebook. We have a website, 1010 Project. It's the number 10 and then the word spelled out 10
Okay.
project.com. And if guys that are interested hear this, they're interested, basically you just fill out a form and then
Mhm.
I call you and we have a
Good.
conversation. And
Good.
because we always want the right guys to do it. And what we say is, this is it's not rehab, it's prehab. And so
Right. I love it.
we're trying to keep guys out of the ditch, as opposed to triage at the end of how do we do this when you
An
mess
ounce
up.
of prevention. Yeah.
Yep.
Outstanding. So let's you said you do a lot of hunting, right? Hunting, fishing.
I do.
How do
Yeah.
you find time to do all of that in
Yeah.
your busy lifestyle?
Some of it, I've landed in this really cool world, where I get to work for a bunch of different organizations, and some of the
Yeah.
organizations that I get to work for, I help raise money for the kingdom. I work for a global nonprofit called One Hope, that
Fantastic.
we get the gospel to kids all over the world. And so my kind of goal in my job there is relationship management.
Okay.
And so, I take guys on hunting trips and fishing
Right.
trips and build relationships. So I took 12 guys to South Africa this year hunting, and I'll take some guys to Wisconsin here in a few weeks hunting. And so it kind of all works in with
Yeah.
my jobs,
Your
and
passion.
yeah,
All right.
God has put me in a really, I'm very, very fortunate, man. So
And so Aiden gets it honest then. He's
he yeah, he does, man. He wasn't super into it before he went to Montana, and
right.
now he is like, he doesn't like hunting as much, but man,
Right.
he loves fly fishing.
That's
So
awesome. So
yeah.
let's talk about your again, in the sermon you had mentioned your
Yeah.
daughter, and you had mentioned the situation that you've
Yeah.
went through with her. And recently, it sounded like recently, maybe it was
Yeah.
immediately after, you have went to
Yeah.
your attorney. You've talked about some planning for the future.
Yeah.
You went from your attorney to your financial planner, and from your planner
Yep.
to your insurance agent. So tell us
Yep.
a little bit about that revelation that you had.
Yeah. So, our daughter, like, we have to do everything for her and take
Mhm.
care of her. And, as a dad, you're kind of always thinking, what happens to her when something happens to me and her mom?
Right.
Right. Like, so who takes care of her? How does she have the financial needs to do what she needs to do in the future? And I tell people, I said, I wish my first response as a pastor was to go to God in prayer about it, but my first response was to call my lawyer and my accountant and my insurance guy and my financial planner.
Right.
And I just, as a dad, I'm living my life, first and foremost for Christ, but after that for my family.
Yeah.
And so I feel like my job is to set my children up well in life.
Mhm.
And my parents did that for us. And so, yeah, so, I was thinking, like, okay, she's special needs and we have quite a bit of life insurance on us if something
Yeah.
were to happen. But I also know that if I were to, my wife and I were to kick the bucket, so to speak, that if she got like this massive lump sum of money, that would then affect her aid from the government.
Medicaid, yes.
And yeah, so we had to set up a special needs trust. That the trust is funded from our life insurance, and then so that was a call to the lawyer of like, man, how do I set up the special needs trust,
Right.
and them helping me and them doing it. And then really, personally for me financially as a pastor, one of the things I see right now in the church world is there is, and I would say this is probably even goes to the business world. There are a lot of men who are getting older who did not plan financially well for any sort of retirement. And
Mm,
so they are unable to hand off the thing that they built to the next generation because they have no way of taking care of themselves.
right.
And so I just told my wife, I said, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to, whatever I build, like whether it's 10-10 or whatever, I want to be able, if my son wants it, to give it to him and like just kind of fade into the shadows
Yeah,
one day.
exactly.
And so we have a financial planner that we
Good.
met with, and I went through our budget with him, laid everything out, and basically, if money is in our account, I will spend it. Like I will
Yeah,
just, I like nice things. I like going on hunting trips and
right,
fishing trips and all that sort of
right.
stuff. And so I just told him, I said, there's a certain amount of money that never needs to see the light of day in our bank account.
Right.
And so I actually have it set up where every month a certain amount drafts out to this other account that they manage, Roth
Awesome.
IRAs, all that sort of stuff, our insurances, everything
Yeah.
comes out of. And that's really just me saying, okay, I may not always make the money that I make now.
Hmm.
So how do I set myself up for the future when I don't know what's coming? Well,
Right.
I need to be smart now with what God's blessed us with. And
Fantastic.
so we just separated it all. And then, the life insurance, you don't even know this. I used to sell life insurance. I worked for
No
the
way.
Guardian. Yeah,
Okay.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I came out, so I have a degree in economics,
Oh,
and
but right on,
and,
man.
and I'm a pastor, so go
Same. Yeah.
figure. But so, for us, life insurance was always something that we carried. And when I, started making more, and then the needs of our daughter, we were just like, okay, well, let's just continue to stay on top of this, and start rolling over some to whole life insurance
Right.
and
Right.
all the sort of things that we do. Because if something happens to me, I don't want my family's lifestyle to have to
So
change.
true. So true. And speaking to that, so did you kind of already understand with the life insurance background, you understood how the special needs trust worked and all of that
A
kind
little
of
bit.
inheritance through the system? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit, not a ton. And that's why, like, our financial planner, he does some stuff, I think, with Northwestern Mutual. Like,
Okay.
he's like, I've got this attorney that
Yeah.
does this, and they'd be really good for you to meet with. And so they basically laid out everything for us on, okay, if something were to happen to y'all, this is how it goes here.
Right.
Our son would actually be like the executor of her trust or whatever.
Of course.
And so, just really a way to protect Riley.
Just a little
And
bit of planning. And,
yeah, man.
you mentioned about faith. I think we're all called to have faith for sure.
Yeah.
But the Bible also talks about considering the ant.
Yeah,
Have you
for
read that
sure.
verse? It's like,
Yeah.
consider the
Yeah.
ant. It lays up in the summer for the winter months, essentially,
Yeah.
is what it's talking about. And
Yeah.
there are going to come winter months. There will come those
For
times in your
sure.
financial picture. And even at the best case, you've got Riley who is depending on you, and you have done the proper planning that's necessary to make sure
Yeah.
that family is taken care of. And that
Yeah.
is a biblical thing.
Yeah. And dude, I think there's a difference between faith and foolishness, right?
Right.
Like,
That's
so
so true.
I think so many people, they want to say like, oh, I've just got faith, I'm not worried about it. Well, I mean, that's foolish. I mean,
Right.
that's just like, why wouldn't you steward? I mean, and then here's the other thing that we always have to remember: everything that God gives us, right? He is ultimately wanting to give to us to help us funnel into the kingdom and
Amen.
build the kingdom or whatever. And so, why wouldn't I make wise decisions to help the kingdom move forward and
Right.
also take care of my family? Because the Bible's very clear that I should also be very concerned about my family and the way
Of
that I take
course.
care of them. So,
Of course.
Yeah.
and the parable of the three servants with the king who traveled far, and one,
Yep.
one received one received two, and one received five.
Yep.
And the
Yep.
one who just dug it in the earth and buried it,
Yep.
it didn't have too much favor with the king when
Yeah.
he came
Yeah.
back. So,
Yeah.
and I think Christ even says, should have taken it to the money changers. Now, not to
Yeah.
say by any means that he was all about adding more zeros to the account, but at the same
Yeah.
time, taking care of your family is necessary. So when I heard that, I had to have you on, because you're already doing the live happy message, and you're doing that in your own way.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur in your own right, very successful in your own right. And then you come in and you talk about the financial planning aspect, and
Yeah.
with a special needs child,
Yeah.
it's an entirely different picture. It's not all about
Mhm.
just saving for retirement at that point.
Yeah.
What you discussed on, I don't want to see it, that is
Yeah.
that's actually a mentality that a lot of people need to take in. And
Yeah.
being an entrepreneur, you probably don't have the traditional IRA, like a 401k, for instance, right? You don't have that
Mm-mm.
401k
I
where
do.
it's
I have
salary deferred.
I work for a university as well, and so I do
Good.
have I have a 403b with them.
403b. Yeah.
But then even after that, we have our own Roth
You don't see
IRA,
it.
and no, I don't even need to hit my bank account. Like,
One of the unique things about a dietitian is when they come into someone, they're trying to help them shape their weight, is they
yeah.
will literally take all the plates out of their cupboard and buy smaller plates. And
Yep.
so we've done a radio show recently called Just Use Smaller Plates. And that's
Yep.
essentially what you're doing, is
Yeah.
if you don't see it, you won't eat it.
Yeah,
And if you
exactly.
don't see it, you won't spend it. Because
Yep.
I'm all about living now. You got to be able to
Yeah,
live now. But
for
at the same
sure.
time, there is going to come a future. So
Yeah, for sure.
you have a special needs trust, you have life insurance that funds that
Hmm.
trust, and in the event of an untimely, or even it sounds like with some whole life insurance, no matter when you
Yep.
pass,
Yep.
and that is necessary with the special needs child as well, because
Yep.
it's never going to be a point in time where they don't need some assistance.
Yep.
You have that life insurance policy dumping into the special needs trust, and that is a phenomenal way to do that. How have you had any discussions on how you will split those life insurance proceeds between the two kids, or is that just
Everybody
something that?
half.
Oh
Everybody
yeah, okay.
each of them get
Everybody has
half.
different strategies. That's good. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So
And
just doing half,
that's for us, man. Like we just want to, both of our kids just half.
of
They
course.
get each half.
Of
So,
course. And it sounds like, Aiden's got a good heart, and he cares
oh,
about his
dude,
sister.
yeah, that's the last thing I would ever have to worry about on this
Right.
earth. So,
Of
because I'd
course.
come back and just haunt him for the rest of his life
Right.
otherwise.
Of course. So we're investing in the kingdom. We're
Yep,
investing spiritually for a brighter day and something much better than what we have here on earth, but at the
for
same time
sure.
being wise steward with the mammon that we have been
Yep,
granted on this earth. I
yep,
love it, man. I love it.
yep.
Is there anything else that you would want to hit on? I mean, we talk, we've been talking here lately on a pretty regular
Yeah,
basis. I want to say this too, with your back issues that you're facing in the next
yeah.
couple of days or weeks, we'll just continue to pray for that
Dude,
situation, that
please. Yeah,
God
please. I
could heal it.
mean, met with a
Uh,
neurosurgeon on Tuesday.
oh
So
man.
hopefully trying
Oh
to
man.
not do surgery at,
Yeah.
I'm 41 and they want to do a spinal
Right.
infusion. And I'm like, no.
And on the
So,
planning side, that even brings up another thing, is disability insurance.
oh,
Making sure
dude.
that you have disability squared away, because
Yeah,
the latest statistics was you were 60 times per, 60% more, let's say 60% more likely to become disabled than to pass away.
for
And
sure.
so
Yeah.
you got to make sure the family's taken care of. So I feel for your wife and for Aiden, because she might be taking care of two people in the home.
Dude, for sure. I mean,
uh,
when I heard it last week, I was just like, I go, you cannot go down. I go, this family will fall apart if
right,
something happens to you.
right.
So,
But
but
God's
yeah.
blessing us. And you just celebrated a birthday, is that right? Did you
No,
just
dude,
get back from
anniversary.
anniversary? Good for you, man.
Yeah,
Good for
yeah,
you, bro.
yeah. So
Uh,
my wife has now had me in her life longer than she has without me. And
hey,
so we were getting ready to go, we were on a trip together, but I'm getting ready to take the whole family to Paris and London for 10 days. And so
nice.
that's going to be kind of a birthday,
Good for
anniversary,
you.
all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Good for you guys.
So,
Well, we wish you well for sure. And thanks so much, Josh, for coming on,
bro,
sharing your
thank you.
story. We hope to touch base with you, Q3 or Q4 of
Yeah.
2023. We can get into that
Yeah.
book and talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
Even send out some copies to people that we have
Yeah,
as
dude.
listeners. We'd love to do that.
That'd be
So
awesome.
But
So
until we talk again, man, just be blessed. Continue to
thanks,
keep
brother.
up the good fight. And you know where to find us if you got a message you want to give us. We would greatly
Well,
appreciate it.
cool. Thank you very much, man.
Yes,
Thanks for
sir.
having me.
Hey, Josh, we'll talk soon.
All right, buddy.
See you, man.